Dan DiDio joined Joe Quesada and Dan Panosian and others on basically Joe Quesada's Drink and Draw YouTube channel. And this is a place where a bunch of comic creators can come together, talk a little bit about the industry, share stories, draw while they're doing it. It's meant to be kind of a reminiscent, a little bit like, inside the actor's studio type approach. But a couple things to pull out of that if you didn't have a chance to look at it. First off, what are you doing listening to me? Just go directly to there. But if you don't have 90 minutes to spare, let me kind of fill in some of the highlights and some of my thoughts around it. Hey everybody, this is Perch. Like mentioned, Dan DiDio was on Joe Quesada's Drink and Draw show, and they had a long conversation talking about a number of parts of the industry. And I wanted to break it down for you. Before I start, hey, if you have not subscribed to the channel, would really appreciate it if you would. Always lets me know that you're out there. It's great to be able to get all the feedback, the comments I've had. And I really appreciate the people both who subscribe and the people who just want to comment. In any case, thanks for listening. I'll start with that. But if you watch this show, like I said, it's basically kind of a reminiscent time where people talk about the industry, they draw, they do little things, and it's meant to kind of give you kind of almost behind the scenes looks at some of these creators. Now, the information presented is often through a particular lens. It's not meant to be news informative. It's not meant to be, journal integrity necessarily, journalist integrity. It's meant to be just a kind of a free-flowing conversation. So, know that going in. You're hearing it from the perspective of the people you're talking to. There's no fact checks or anything like that. Just it is what's on their mind. Well, there's a couple things that came out from this interview. And the first is basically DiDio talking about the New 52 and being very proud of that first year, but then saying things kind of, fell apart in the second year. They didn't spend enough time on it, and that the wheels really came off the bus in the third year. Now, I mean, it's a true statement. If you were reading those comics at the time, it certainly did feel that way, that things got a little bit looser, a little bit less coordinated. The initial launch of the New 52 felt like a very, very coordinated, very planned event. There was a lot of things in sync with each other. Now, behind the scenes, we knew, George Perez was having issues, Grant Morrison was doing his thing to the annoyance of others, and Rob Liefeld was there, and there's a lot of, I think, back and forth and angst within even that first year of the New 52. But from the outside, from a retailer perspective and from a reader perspective, it came off like a well-oiled machine. And then things did seem to fall apart. Well, DiDio reveals that, they were able to spend 6 to 9 months really getting things planned and putting a lot of prep into the launch of the New 52. And then once things got going, then they didn't have time anymore. They were just kind of throwing things at the wall. They were moving quicker, spending less time on development, and spending less energy making changes for characters that they felt were worthy of a new direction or line. Now, this is an interesting comment because the reality is you're either a good planner or you're not. So if you're in the editorial group or you're kind of in charge of this comics line, you have to be able to spin multiple plates of both what's going out and what you're planning for the future. And it's an interesting admission because basically it's saying that, without that 6 to 9 months worth of prep and that thinking and that planning, that same amount of energy as DiDio called it, things fall apart. But the reality is if you're managing an ongoing line of comics, you got to figure out a way to do that planning while running at the same time. And it's interesting that there's kind of this admission that, hey, we didn't have the time to plan. We didn't have the same energy for year 2, year 3, and things got worse. Well, that's a reality of the comic business, is that you do have to, you can't just put a bunch of energy, do a launch, go break for a year, put the energy in again. It's a strange reaction, is what he's saying. I have an odd reaction to what he's saying here because I think it's just not necessarily viable. What he's talking about for the comic industry. So it was an interesting comment and one that kind of stuck out of my head because if we think about problems that editorial has had, places where comics continuity, not just DC but Marvel as well, have planning issues. Well, I mean, here we're seeing the guy who was the former co-publisher, editor-in-chief, the guy who's in charge of a lot of this, kind of admit that they need this heavy planning time in order for things not to feel chaotic. But the question would be, well, how can you possibly have that planning time if you're continuously publishing? It's an interesting dynamic there. The Throughout the whole session, one thing that you definitely got was a lot of very friendly comments from DiDio toward Marvel. Joe Quesada, of course, still works at Marvel, was recently demoted by Kevin Feige as Feige came in and kind of reorganized. And there's certainly a lot of speculation that Quesada is on the way out or could be on the way out, or not sure where he sits anymore with some of the changes that have been made to the company. And I don't mean to spark those rumors. It's not me creating those rumors. This has been kind of a topic of open conversation since Feige came in and really took more command of this unit. So it was interesting to hear DiDio being very complimentary to Marvel. A lot of people are already speculating, oh, he's going to get a job there. Quesada's going to let him in, and this is him basically interviewing for his Marvel job through the show. I don't think so. DiDio and Quesada have been friends for a long time. They definitely have a long relationship, and I know they've been friendly forever, so I don't think it's any of that. And I think it's less about necessarily DiDio thinking he's getting a job at Marvel, because in the current climate and with everything else, I mean, you'd have to be very delusional to think that you're going to get hired by any company right now at that level, while a lot of reorganization, just questions about the future are in people's minds. But I don't think he's delusional. I think that this is more just the nature of the friendly relationship between Quesada and DiDio. And maybe a little bit as well of just some sour grapes a bit toward DC. I mean, you were fired from, one company and you're complimenting their rival. And I mean, that's not the most shocking story in the world. DiDio talked about the exception becoming the rule. This is interesting. Kind of, he went on about creators need to constantly be evolving characters. The characters cannot stay still, that they need to be forever moving forward. And that there's a trap when you let a writer or an artist or a creator basically get onto a comic where they're in love with the character, because they tend to produce worse work. This is an interesting philosophical question, and I guess I would like to see more creators who love the characters be put on them so we could compare. Right now we're getting kind of this very intellectual argument about, well, if you love the character too much, you'll put in worse work. But no real proof that that's the case. We're just kind of being told that that's a problem. But we don't, I mean, what are we comparing this to? Who are the creators who were on titles too long? Brian Michael Bendis loved Jessica Jones and Alias and some of those characters and comics he wrote. He loved Ultimate Spider-Man, was on that for a while. And, Quesada and others have praised Bendis for putting in an epic run with those characters. So are we saying that Bendis didn't actually love these characters after all, and now it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I understand the idea of somebody having blind spots to a particular topic. You don't want to put people on a comic where they're going to have blind spots to their own character. And if they love them too much, maybe they won't be pushed to do something new and dynamic. But at the same time, a lot of the new and dynamic that happened at DC through the New 52 and other eras during DiDio's run were not received well. So, I mean, I guess you could say that, there's dangers of letting people who love the specific comic character work too much on them. Okay. But at the same time, Quesada's saying, oh, they don't present their best work. All right. But is what we're seeing right now their best work? I mean, who defines best work? Is this from the editor creatively, who just gets to decide what great work is? Is this by sales? I mean, who are we talking about here? John Byrne talked about how he loved the Fantastic Four, and it was something that was very close to him. Chris Claremont has talked about he loved the X-Men. It was very close to him. They both had epic runs that today people really think and really focus on. But are we to believe now that those aren't great runs? That's not a good idea? I understand the idea that they're trying to put forth, but it feels a little bit like reaching in order to convey a message of everything has to change, which was the other thing they would talk about was, the characters must be moving forward, never backward. You have to do things new. You have to push the characters outside of their comfort zone. You have to constantly be evolving. And, we got agreement from the room on that, and Quesada's agreeing. And to that, I guess I would say, okay, if that's true, then why in the world is why in the world did you make the call of taking Spider-Man, who had a marriage, and you could say it was stagnant, and wanting to move him forward by moving him backward to where he was single again? Again, the actions, the statements in this session were fine as opinions, and we guess we get to know how they think, but they don't really match up with the actions, what actually happened, or what's going on in the marketplace. I mean, how many times have we seen a new and exciting take on a character only to have the readers largely reject it and say you've forgotten what the core and the essence of this character is all about? We all know that DiDio enjoys kind of pushing the envelope and getting characters to move to new places. That's always been his MO. But I would say at the same time, we've seen by and large a lot of these runs be unsuccessful. And so if that's the case, which angle are we going to be moving from here? It was an interesting. It was 90 minutes worth of interview, and it's certainly worth your time to listen to. I'd go and listen. DiDio and Quesada were very chummy and had lots in common, and if rumors are to be true, could be having more in common in the weeks to come. But the confusing aspect of it is it's easy to kind of intellectually say, hey, don't let creators who love a character too much write on them, they don't put in good work, or constantly be pushing for change, and forget that telling a classic story, telling a core of what these characters are. I mean, one of the things that I think was very indicative of Hickman's run with Fantastic Four is that he seemed to get the core and the essence of who the Fantastic Four were. He certainly pushed them in new directions. He certainly gave them new things to fight and to challenge, but there wasn't this all new, all different, all shocking kind of reveal. To me, that feels a lot like the 90s, where we had the Wasp turn into a bug creature and Wolverine devolved into some kind of mutant primate character. And it's like, no, can you believe this shocking new status quo? Sue Storm's got a boob window costume. I mean, that kind of stuff, it feels like stunt marketing and writing, not necessarily, I guess I would say, their best work. The best work tends to come when I feel a deep love and respect from the characters or from the writers and the creators for the characters. So it's an interesting dynamic. Certainly a lot of moving parts there. Like I said, take a look for yourself. You have 90 minutes. It's interesting to listen to these guys, chum around and talk about the industry. Always more information is always good information, however you feel about it. Anyway, do you have any comments, thoughts? How do you feel about creators who love the character too much? That sounds like a bad medical problem. Anyway, let me know in the comments below. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch. Let me know your feeling, your analysis. Thanks for listening.